think that there is a giant opportunity when the markets are changing. And so I am excited about a recession. I'm excited about changes in real estate. I don't feel threatened by it at all because I feel like this is an opportunity to double down. Most people, Harvard research shows, cut marketing when the recession hits. Historically, through all of the recessions that they have measured and tracked, the people who double down on marketing during recession pick up all the customers of the people that cut off on their marketing. To me, it's like, come on, recession, I'm ready to go because I know what I'm going to do is double down on all the things that I'm doing, see where the pivoting opportunities are, acquire the people who can't make it. You got a beautiful espresso machine out there that you got as a result of a down economy for a minute.
This is true.
Right?
Yes.
So,
today I'm sitting down with Roland Frasier. I have had many conversations with him, but this is the first one that we have captured. And I will tell you, it does not disappoint. Roland Frasier is an active investor and has participated in more than 1,000 business deals. He says with a value of up to $4 billion. I know him because he is one of the principals of digitalmarketer.com, scalable.co, and was one of the principals of War Room before it disbanded, which was a business group for entrepreneurs. He is an awesome person. He is wicked smart. And every time I listen to him, in person, on stage, on video, I am feverishly taking notes. And this conversation should be no exception for you. He is very well known for his background in acquisitions. He will refer to himself as a recovering attorney. He was an M&A attorney, mergers and acquisition. And today we'll dig into a lot of the details around that. We'll talk about a 9-figure deal, breaking it apart, letting you know the operating components of it, the tactics and strategies that went into it. We'll talk about smaller deals, breaking them apart. We'll also talk about timely relevant things like how to leverage acquisitions through a recession and how to find opportunities there. Inside and outside of acquisitions, you will get tons of nuggets around business operations, tactics, and strategies. I hope that you enjoy the conversation as much as I did, but there are tons of takeaways, so don't miss this one. Roland Frasier, I appreciate you coming out, man. It's good to see you.
thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Definitely. We have you now trapped in Austin for 2 full weeks, right?
Yes, one more week. Yeah.
That's awesome. And that is because you were closing out a group that I've been a part of for a long time.
Correct.
And the other event you spun up recently? Or?
We did. Last year was the first one. It's called Get Scalable Live. I think it was called something different last year. We're still finding our feet on exactly what is going to be the best topic. But it's a 3-day event, and that comes up I think in 2 or 3 more days. So
love it. What are the fundamentals of that one?
It's really based on our scalable company. So we have a company, scalable.co, where we talk about the 7 levels of business to go from selling your first 10 things to getting a growth engine put in, an operating system, then building a board, then growth through acquisitions, and ultimately moving into kind of lifestyle investing.
I like it. That rings a bell because we just had lunch with Justin Donald yesterday.
We did indeed, yeah, exactly.
The lifestyle investor.
Yes.
Cool. So I want to talk background a little bit. I want to hit on acquisitions because I think it's one of these sort of, A, you talk about it all day, and so you know lots of things about it.
Sure.
But B, I think it's a scary topic for lots of entrepreneurs that haven't sort of dipped their toe into it. How do you buy? How do you find? How do you buy? How do you integrate?
Mm-hmm.
What does that all look like?
Mm-hmm.
But before we get there, I know you through the lens of digital marketer.
Yep.
Right. So we were doing credit card processing for digital marketer in probably 13, 14, 15.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got involved in War Room.
Mm-hmm. And
you entered the picture early with digital marketer and War Room. But that was kind of where you came from in my world, was being this, and Ryan Dice and Perry Belcher both had presented you as the smartest one to come to the group and make the group do better things. But that was kind of how you entered. Where did you come from before then, and how did you get into that place in the first place?
So the entry point there was kind of interesting, but I originally came from real estate. And I got my real estate agent's license when I was 18 and started selling real estate. And then I realized that I didn't want to just go door to door trying to talk people into letting me list their houses. And so I was like, well, who has a whole bunch of houses? Developers. Okay. So I went and started approaching developers. And then I hooked up with a couple of those guys so that I could sell all of their listings at a better rate, but still it was a lot easier. And then as I started talking to them and I saw what they were doing, I was like, okay, so you do this development stuff. How do you do that? And they're like, well, we do limited partnerships. We call them syndications, and we raise money, and we take a piece of the deal and give investors back. And I was like, that's kind of cool. I said, you need insurance for that though, right? Like, key person insurance. And they were like, yeah. I was like, so if I had my insurance license, would you buy the insurance from me? They're like, sure. So I got my insurance license when I was 19.
Wow.
And then I started finding out more about how they were doing it, raising the money. And I said, I'd like to take my hand at raising money. And they're like, well, you have to have a securities license for that. So they didn't offer that in Richmond, Virginia, where I was at the time. So I had to go up to DC. But when I was 20, I got my Series 7. And so that I could start selling the securities to raise. So I started selling. At that point, I was putting together syndications for developments and things like that. I did it with some of those guys for a while. Then I started doing it on my own. And I'd guess we did about 10,000 units over the period of time that I was doing that, everywhere from Virginia, Carolina, Georgia, Florida, down to the Cayman Islands.
Wow.
Yeah.
All multifamily, or?
They were mostly single family houses and condos. Yeah.
Okay. So there are probably 8,000 different things we could talk about relative to deal structure. Mm-hmm. But if you are creating that structure for real estate development, do you need a securities license in all situations, or are there other ways to structure that so you don't?
Well, I think if you're selling the interests for a commission, you do. So if you were a principal, there would be an issuer exclusion that would apply. So if you or I went into partnership to buy an office building or something like that, and we were both out there talking to our friends and selling people interests in it, then that would probably not require a license because you're not working for a third party on a commission basis. And there's some other exclusions too. But yeah, if you're just doing what I was doing, which is, let me go raise some money, then generally something has to be required.
So as the partners in the deal, if you want a sales rep to raise money for you, then they have to have
would like for them to be licensed. Yeah.
Got it.
I don't want to say legal advice or anything, but I would definitely talk to an attorney about that because it sounds like they would need to have a license.
I see. Well, that's good. I didn't realize that. So you were super young. So you were 19. How long did you do real estate development? And were you just selling for a commission through that, or were you a principal on any of those deals?
I did start doing my own deals. So 18, 19, I was just a salesperson. 20, age 18, 19 age. Then probably 20, I started doing my own stuff. And I would buy land and get entitlements, and then, in the direction of the growth of the city, and then sell it. I would option land and hang on to it for a few years until that happened. We'd buy land from estates who'd look and see, when large parcels of land were owned by people and people died. And we'd go out, and I remember one deal we had like 18 different heirs we had to track down around the country, which was not easy then because there was no Google or internet.
Right.
So that was fun. But yeah, a lot of real estate is really, kind of where I got started. And then I haven't ever stopped. So I still do that. But I've evolved more into just things that I really enjoy. And we were talking yesterday, I like doing the luxury house acquisitions and redevelopments. And the funny thing is you can make about the same on that you can on something that's so much more work just because of the scale.
I mean, I would posit that there's more perceived risk in the luxury real estate. And maybe that's just not understanding it. For other people.
Yeah, but I don't think so. I mean, the only thing I would say is in terms of you have a diversification risk in that you've got one property you might have $5 or $6 million in, but there's so much work in everything in the others.
Yeah.
And I don't know that you have, I guess if you bought a really bad property that had a methane gas issue, an environmental issue, and a cracked slab that you had to redo everything, maybe there, but it's, But if you do a little bit of due diligence, you're probably not going to get caught with that. So I did that real estate stuff until as I went through school. And as we were talking a minute ago, when I saw your keyboard over there, I played in bands from age 15 till about 42 out in clubs and things like that, which was real fun. So I was doing that for 3 years before I got my real estate license. And then I was doing real estate school in that, got an accounting degree and a law degree. When I got my securities license, it was through a firm in New York and through a connection I had. And through there, I got introduced to some people up there on Wall Street and Water Street. And so I worked with Prudential Securities. And at the time, this is the late 80s, I learned how to do leverage buyouts from those guys. So I had one of the investment bankers took me under his wing, and it was like, you need to dress like this, and you need to do this, and go to these places and learn this stuff. And so I started buying companies with leverage, and then never really stopped that, but realized as that was happening that a lot of the things I learned about real estate and acquiring real estate with little or no money out of pocket could apply to companies. It's like, you can option real estate, you can option companies, you can seller finance real estate, you can seller finance companies. And I found the companies to be a lot more interesting because there were a lot more variables that you could play with that didn't exist in real estate. And I also like business. Real estate is fairly static, and business is much more challenging. So I really enjoyed that. And just kind of kept doing that as I got my degree in accounting and law, and practiced law for 13 years, but never stopped doing real estate and business. And as I was practicing law, pretty early on, I realized that there were a lot of people that were successful entrepreneurs that were kind of accidental entrepreneurs. They didn't really know much about business.
You don't say.
But they had successful businesses. Right. And so there was a lot of opportunity as you got in and kind of looked under the hood, representing them as a business attorney. And I did business and tax, primarily tax and securities, actually. And so
as an attorney.
Yeah. And so looking there, I was like, hey, there's a lot you could do here that you're not doing right now. How about instead of paying me a fee for legal, you give me part of the company? I started with profit shares and then worked my way into equity. And I was like, my very first deal was a guy that was doing property tax reassessments in California. And I was like, you could automate this and do this, and we could put this on here and do this. And let me help you with that. And I'll split the profits, the increase in profits with you, 50-50. And so 9 months later, we split $1.8 million in profit that he didn't have before. And I was like, well, this is kind of fun.
I like this game.
Every $900,000 helps. I've said that ever since back then.
Love it.
And then just kind of kept on evolving and evolving. When you met me, I love puzzles. So what I really like is I love securities law because there's a whole set of rules, and then you have fact patterns that you have to analyze and apply to the rules to come out with a conclusion, right? And in law, they call it IRAC, issue, rule, analysis, conclusion. But taxes were the same. So it's the same thing. There's a complex set of rules that who knows what they mean. And there's all kinds of interpretations of them. And then there's case law. So there's the law, the primary law. There's the regulations that the agency that administers the law says apply. And then there are interpretations from the court. And then there's creativity beyond that. So you have 4 levels of application of different stuff to see if you can piece things together to get the result that you want. And I love situations like that. So in marketing, I found SEO to be like that. And so I got into SEO. I built a private blog network for just, grins and giggles, and found that I could start ranking kind of anything. And then my very first war room, I went and I was doing ranking. I had bought domains. I used to own betonit.com and makeabet.com and several internet casinos off in different places, and then some photography sites and other things. So I was already doing that because along the way, and I'll shut up here in a minute. I feel like I'm rambling. Along the way, but you're like, tell me what your history is.
Yeah, totally.
Along the way, one of my business partners, his mother was Esther Williams, who was the swimming star from long ago. And his brother was Lorenzo Lamas, who was in this sexy, sultry show called Renegade, I think at the time. And he had Tony Robbins as a client. So I met Tony way back then. And then I worked on all the infomercial deals with Guthrie Rinker. I did the Power Talk deals, the United Artists deals,
really,
a whole bunch of that stuff. And that exposed me to infomercials. And then we started talking to Bill and Greg, the Guthrie Rinker guys, and said, well, how many, these infomercials, how are you funding them? Because I had raised money for years at this point, right? And they're like, well, we put them together, and 1 out of 5 of them, 1 out of 10 in the industry usually works. For us, we're a little bit better at it, so 1 out of 5. And I was like, well, how about if we just raise the money? We'll act as the producers, and you guys do all the infomercial stuff. We'll give you money, and then we'll split the profits. And they were like, sure. So we did 16 infomercials together, and that was really fun, and that got me really into direct response. I think it was a combination of that and my property tax guy, which was direct mail. So I was doing direct mail and television and print ads and radio ads, back in the very late 80s and early 90s, all through, now, I guess. So I was really familiar with all that stuff. So then when I met Tony, and getting into that, and we did like the book deals with Simon and Schuster and all that. So I had my own contract with Simon and Schuster. They would send me, when I did all the other people that came to us, because when we represented Tony, all the other, motivational speakery type people came to us.
Sure.
And so then I wouldn't have to do that much work. So they're just like, can you just send me the contract we did before? And they're like, yeah, fine. It's like, which is great because it's like a 70-page contract.
Huge.
So, so all of that kind of set me up for, I really love the puzzle of how do you either identify or create demand, and then how do you apply the rules or the channels and techniques to the opportunity to turn it into money. That just to me was absolutely fascinating, and I continue to be fascinated by that.
Yeah, I love that. I was talking to my parents. They were in town for the last few days about. They were talking about sort of this. They were very traditional doctors, right? Mm-hmm. Went down the educate yourself, use your education to trade for money.
Yep.
Right. And then retire.
Yeah.
And then, quote unquote, do what you want to do.
Right.
And I was like, if I retired now, I would do functionally the same thing. Mm-hmm. Right. Maybe not in the exact same way, but pretty much.
Yeah.
Right. Because for me, the projects that my parents do, which is like my father makes stained glass lamps, my mother likes to garden, mm-hmm. and both are actually pretty elaborate things and mm-hmm. interesting. Mm-hmm. But the extra element, the extra part of the puzzle is how do you do that and also make money while doing it?
Right.
And that's the fun of business.
Yeah. So I would have to garden for profit or make stained glass windows and then figure out how can I sell them on Etsy and then build a store on eBay. And,
exactly.
It's like,
exactly.
So
right?
The cool thing is you're blessed to do the thing that you would do even if it didn't pay.
Totally.
Right? Yeah.
Well, I think to your point that the extra elements of the puzzle are mm-hmm. the fun part, right?
Yeah.
The extra elements are like, well, yeah, I could just go do this, but it's not as challenging or fulfilling.
It's not. And I also like the competition. So I'm a competitive person in business and, in sports and things like that. So I want to win and I like winning. And I think business is kind of like golf. You're playing against yourself. You don't have to play against somebody else. So you can have a prosperity mentality that rising tide lifts all boats and not be threatened by competition with other people, because I'm not competing with other people. I'm competing with what I've done before and what's my personal best and all that. And so I think for me, that's a healthy way to not get like obsessed about what other people are doing and also still have fun and keep it gamified.
Yeah, I love that. I think that to that end, a good reminder in general is that unless you represent the macro, mm-hmm. unless your business is a huge chunk of the macro, mm-hmm. any economic shifts can be overcome by your own actions internally.
Yeah.
Right. So the economy gets totally destroyed. Mm-hmm. You can outwork that.
Yeah.
Right. But you can't if you are Amazon.
Right.
Necessarily. Right. You are most of the economy.
Right.
But if you are just this little sliver, which almost all businesses are,
right.
You can always outwork it. Yeah. And so that ownership of what can I do differently, I think leans into this idea of you're really competing with yourself all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. No matter what. Mm-hmm. I love that.
Yeah. And even if you're a giant company, look at Apple. I think Apple now derives most of their profit from their services, but they were a product company. So like they did make a pretty significant pivot from, I think they were personal computers into Jobs saying, well, let's do phones because there's so many more people. Everybody's got a phone and the personal computer is going to be on a phone. So I think even if you're an Amazon, you can say and Amazon did a great job also of saying, what if instead of being the everything store, we are the conduit to everything and we're not the store itself. Not that they're not still competing as a store, but I think they have 135 million subscribers to Prime.
Wow.
So like the profit that comes from their subscription service that just provides some video that you'll probably never watch and 2-day shipping.
Right.
I mean, I pay the membership. I don't know what else I get for it, but I like the 2-day shipping or the 2 hours, sometimes.
Yeah.
But they really do have the ability to shift the business too. And both of those to me are pretty significant. I know iPhone is more than 50%. I just read of the telephone market in the United States, that's a heck of a shift.
Huge.
But really, it's not about selling those things. It's about the App Store and it's about all the services that they do. It's kind of interesting.
That is interesting. I mean, it's a good counterpoint to the general narrative painted. But I think that in both cases, I guess, I hadn't thought about it that way. In both cases, it's the reliance on yourself to make the shift.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And when we go through moments like now, Q4 2022, where we are going down a hill in some capacity relative to recession, it's a good reminder.
It is. The funny thing is to me, it's all the talk of the recession. I think it's just mostly media, because in recession, in changing times, all of the research shows that that's when the big opportunities exist. The big challenge, if you're an incumbent, then it's a challenge. Okay. But it's hard to unseat the incumbents in an up economy, which we had for 12 years, so, and now we're kind of like, it's a recession, but it's not, but it is, but it's not, we're kind of on the fence, because I think investors just are refusing to acknowledge that it is. So they keep propping up the stock market, but eventually the Fed's like, you know what? Okay, here you go.
Right.
So I think that there is a giant opportunity when the markets are changing. And so I am excited about a recession. I'm excited about changes in real estate, and I don't feel threatened by it at all, because I feel like this is an opportunity to double down. Most people, Harvard research shows, cut marketing when the recession hits. But historically, through all of the recessions that they have measured and tracked, the people who double down on marketing during recession pick up all the customers of the people that cut off on their marketing. So it's like, to me, it's like, come on, recession, I'm ready to go, because I know what I'm going to do is double down on all the things that I'm doing, see where the pivoting opportunities are, acquire the people who can't make it. You got a beautiful espresso machine out there that you got as a result of a down economy for a minute.
This is true.
Right?
Yes. Yeah. Well, then that's what I was just going to say, is that the beautiful thing about this recession is the cyclical nature of business and life frequently is large enough or long enough that people forget. Or they haven't been exposed to the last one. So
especially this time.
This time, yeah. The new entrepreneurs in this wave of entrepreneurialism is sexy and the thing, right? They've never been a part of a downturn, right? So there's no question that this is a cool time. And those people, if they were paying attention, should have seen COVID and should have gotten some of these lessons through COVID. Yeah. And now that was a bizarre, anomaly relative to our lifetime. But it had a lot of the same principles, right?
Yes.
So through COVID, we saw people tank, we saw people double down, we saw acceleration, we saw all this cool stuff happen. And it was a micro of any other recession.
Yeah. With a spin that if you were brick and mortar, you probably suffered.
Yes.
But if you were digital, if you were investing in crypto, you had huge profits. If you were in
any
digital,
e-com.
anything.
Any econ.
Right?
Yeah.
And so now all of those people, like you look at Peloton, we're going to build a factory and we're going to spend $450 million on this. And then it's like, we need to lay everybody off. And we need to, it's like, come on, it's so the interesting thing is I think that those people that grew up without having gone through a recession before, that had the huge bull run, anybody, particularly who's younger, maybe say 30 or so and younger, hasn't really experienced that. And so they're like, well, we'll double down on, and I think that's why you see the market kind of not sure what it's going to do. Because I think they're saying, well, we'll double down on crypto now because it's half what it was, a little bit ago. But eventually they're going to run out of money.
Right.
And the economy is going to do what the economy is going to do, no matter how much we don't want it to. And it will be interesting to see how all of those people fare, and the people that got the artificial bump from COVID.
Yeah.
So I still think in terms of acquisition, there's crazy opportunities that are going to be out there.
Yeah. Well, your message and what you've told me for years now, and what I've heard from you for years, is that there's always opportunity with acquisition. So I want to get to that. But before I do, I want to get some idea of how and why acquisitions are the thing for you. So you've gone through kind of an interesting path of, 18, 19 is a very early age to start to figure out, let me stick my fingers in other things, right? You barely gave the real estate thing a shot before you said, hey, I need a better way to do this. And then you got into that and said, oh, wait, but what are you doing over here? Let me figure that out. When you think about your day-to-day, you did this from the beginning, but often I think that's actually a struggle for people from the beginning when they start a company. How do you think about the distribution of your time relative to a core thing that you're working on versus other things that you're trying to expand on or might potentially be tangential?
I think it just happened. I had the benefit in terms of starting young because my father continues to be a tax attorney to this day.
Oh, wow.
And so he was he worked for the Internal Revenue Service as a revenue agent, then a appeals conferee, then got his law license and was an attorney for them, and then the head of the president of their employees group. Then he wrote the EA exams for their enrolled agents for several years and was on congressional advisory boards. And so I always had, as a kid, these people that I wanted to be like coming into his office that were not in suits and didn't work out of offices and were doing everything from they owned horses and they owned gold mines and they owned businesses and they had algorithms that they owned, which, I didn't know what the heck an algorithm was until somebody said that. And then, all of them were making enough money that they had tax problems because he was a tax attorney, right? So they were either structuring because they were doing really well, or they were fighting with the IRS because they had done well and, there was a disagreement about what they should pay. And so I had that on that side. And on the other side, my mother was obsessed with Carl Jung. And so she was like, I had so many psychology books all around all the time. So like my 6th grade book report was on I'm okay, you're okay, and transactional analysis and how our parent, adult, and child are talking to different parts of us. And weird kid, right? Between that and Tolkien. Yes. And so all of that kind of went into saying, like I saw that the lifestyle that I wanted to live was my father's client's lifestyle. I did not want my father's life being in the office with a suit on as the attorney. I thought the guy on the other side of the desk was the guy that I wanted to be, which is funny because I just read something about a big meeting up in the Hamptons, and it was all these finance guys, and they're all in suits and decked out, but there's a few people that are in like jeans and hoodies and things like that. And one of the guys that was in a jean hoodie, feeling kind of bad, walked up to the bar, and the other guy was like, "So you figured it out yet?" And he was like, "What?" And he said, "The guys in suits work for the guys in hoodies." I was like, that. So that was my motivation, was to not be in the business as an attorney or something like that. So I practiced law because I didn't know what I want to be when I grow up. And I was like, well, if I get a degree in accounting and I get do the law thing until I figure that out, it'll be helpful. And it always has been. But I saw really early on that I wanted the lifestyle, and then knowing that I wanted that as I got into each of those things. And I'm not at all afraid to hustle, but it's got to be a limited hustle to create an asset that will create continuing wealth after that. So I'm about, my time investment is a finite resource to be dedicated to something that then I can remove myself from, but having created an asset, have somebody else go in and continue to do that after that. And so I just I guess I evolved into that pretty early from between the psychology and the business. Does that make sense?
Totally. It does. But then I look at certain examples of, and you mentioned, you gave a few sentences on, you still went down this road of being the accountant and the attorney and practicing for 13 years. Mm-hmm. That's a long time to practice.
But I was doing deals the whole time.
Okay.
So it's kind of like right now, you could say, you're, you have a marketing company, a digital marketer,
right.
But, that's not all of the things that I have done for decades and decades have simply been for deal flow.
That's super interesting. So if it's all for deal flow, how did the SEO interlude fit into that picture?
So when I got into direct response, I really love direct response. I love the game of let's create a message and send it out through some channel and hope that the cash register rings. That's fascinating to me. I really like that game. So SEO just came, when the internet came into being, I was there. I was programming, I learned BASIC when I got my first Apple IIe computer, and actually it was a Radio Shack TRS 80 that I got, and then I got a Commodore 64, and then I got an Apple IIe, and so I was programming BASIC, and then I took Pascal, and then eventually HTML and Cold Fusion and some of the other things. So I really liked the puzzle of I can take all this gibberish and create something that will do something that I want it to do.
Yeah.
And so all of those puzzles, it's just a puzzle on puzzle. So SEO was just another puzzle. I got into direct response. It was like, okay, what markets can we run the infomercials in to make them work? And then how long do we run the infomercial, which is generally the highest profit thing that we do? before we go to television spots, before we go to radio, before we go to credit card inserts and catalogs and home shopping TV, and then down the line into retail, which is the lowest profit that we get. And what's the timing? How long do we do each of those? And how does one support the other? And then, where do we start our tests? And how long do we run those? And how do we option a celebrity to be all of that was a very complex puzzle that to me was fascinating. And as I got more and more into direct response and I was doing TV, radio, print, and direct mail, I saw the internet coming. And because I was interested in programming already, I was there for all of the initial horrible speeds that internet, worked at. And
I recall.
And so SEO, when search became a thing, I was involved in SEO. Like I knew about it. And so I was fascinated by it. And that attracted me because it was a new puzzle.
So I opened that question with how did it tie into deal flow? But I think parallel to that is how do you decide what things warrant, what puzzles warrant you spending time on to figure out? Is it how do those things meet in your life, right? There's the one thing where you're just in your own world of I need, like doing a literal puzzle. Yep. I like to do literal puzzles,
I do
right?
too. Yep.
I've got a couple wood puzzles, which are the shit because they snap together and they're great. You can have more unique pieces and it's awesome.
Yep.
But that is it is kind of a brain activity for me, but it's a recreational activity, right? The other puzzles that you spend your time on, how do you learn to program? How do you learn to design? How do you learn to whatever, right? How do you pick those things? Is it important that it overlaps with deal flow or with the rest of business? Or
it is. So I'm looking at trends. I'm big on trends. Subscribe to all of the services that have them, and read voraciously. And so when I see something that seems like it's surfacing as a trend, then I'll look for the puzzle, and I'm going to definitely dive into that. I assume that everything I do that makes me money right now will not be there in 5 years at all times, and so. I'm not caught by surprise like I've seen several people be. Not that I'm always right, because I got many stories of how much money I've missed out on by doing stupid things. But really, it's even with crypto. It's like, so crypto's interesting, but coins are too risky to me. So we invest in picks and shovels, because the picks and shovels are still going to be there because they're infrastructure, whereas the coins might come or go, right? So I like that. And so I'm interested in and playing now with some of the crypto programming languages just because I want to understand, how does it work? But that's definitely a place to be, because no matter what happens, once we get through all of that, we're so in the infancy of it. Once we get through the gambling and the hype and it becomes functional, then that's going to replace a lot of things. Might get rid of real estate agents,
Yeah, totally.
Right.
Hopefully.
So amen. And I own a brokerage. Right?
Yeah. So what are the other picks and shovels in that space right now? Not necessarily in crypto, but just in general, what do you see as the trends and what are you investing in right now?
Yeah. For me right now, it is that infrastructure and Web3, just generally. I think that's really good. And what I'm primarily investing in is businesses. So I'm looking at businesses now. I have, I've got 38 verticals that I have holding companies in. And within those verticals, we have different companies that support those. So I'm less looking for new things right now, as much as I am looking at how do I grow the things that I've got. And so I'm kind of an opportunistic new thing finder. Yeah. If something shows up in trends, and there's nothing really new right now. There's a lot of things that are nascent that I think will turn into something, and I'm involved in those things. But more and more, I like distribution. I like, how do you distribute something for lots and lots of people. And I like being a franchisor consulting company. I like that because if we can own a franchisor consulting company and have several franchisors coming, those are, then we're helping in the picks and shovels distribution for the people who are actually going to be investing to expand. We're not going to share the risk of the franchisor because we're providing services to them, but we're going to share in the upside because we do it on an equity basis. And then the risk is, it's de-risked by the fact that you have all these other people that are coming. And the other thing that I'm really focused on is kind of like the movie Inception. I meta deals. I like a deal within a deal within a deal. So I like to do a deal with the franchise consulting company because I know that they're going to have multiple clients coming to them in the form of franchisors. And now I'm going to own equity in all of those things, as opposed to I'm betting on the one company that's going to open an acai bowl restaurant. Right. Does that make sense?
Totally. Yeah. A lever that has a lever.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like it. Okay. So let's talk about acquisition specifically.
Okay.
So you've got the meta acquisition strategy, and then you also have a business that brings in small businesses through the lens of growth by acquisition. I can help you grow your business through acquisition.
Yep.
What's the target size that you want for those clients?
Yeah. So for my clients that I'm going to do a deal with,
well, this is how I think about your acquisition funnel. You have a big funnel that is anybody that needs to learn about acquisitions come here.
Correct. For free.
Yep. And then when does the productization start there?
Sure.
And what are sort of the segments of size of the businesses that you're targeting for the different products you're selling?
Sure.
How does it break down?
So the first thing would be that super wide funnel with everybody. And then for people that there's not really a criteria other than us being sure that it's not like only people who are doing this much money or have this experience or whatever, because to find deals, I don't think that that's that important. Right. What's important is your experience and your hustle and your coachability and your desire to go do things. And so we bring people into our deals mastermind that are interested in those things. It turns out that most of them have already had several businesses. We get people from private equity. We get people from venture. We get a lot of people from finance, people from due diligence that were due diligencing other people's deals that now want to kind of step into the role themselves. All of those are the primary kinds of people that we attract, and entrepreneurs just generally. So in that, we have a group of people and they pay to be part of that. So that's the productization. But again, my big concern for them is just that they know the methods and that they're skin in the game so that they'll actually do something. And so really the fee to join that as much as anything is just to be sure that it's somebody that's going to be serious, because I don't want somebody that's just going to be, hey, here's a deal. And how about this deal? And how about this deal? And how about this deal? I want somebody that knows how we look at things and what's the process that we go through. And then if we can help with a deal like that, that's great. And so from that, I have a company that just got a $250 million valuation in the aerospace industry to do internet in space, basically through satellites.
Awesome.
Like with NASA. That's super fun, right? And then I pick up a piece of that for consulting. And what was the other one? And then we're doing a roll up, as you know, with Sam and those guys in the real estate space.
Yeah.
So like those kinds of things, I met Sam through the mastermind process. So I'm a big fan of let's get a bunch of smart people together to elevate each other. And so being an organizer of one of those groups is a good spot to be in the flow of what might come from it.
Yeah.
And so like those are two deals that are percolating along at a relatively high level. And then I just got involved in an oil and gas franchise deal that'll be kind of similar, right? And so if it works, that's great. If it doesn't, it doesn't matter.
Well, so let's break apart Sam's. Because I think where I'm driving is, or what I want to get out of your experience for a lot of people is, when do acquisitions make sense? And I started by saying, what size business do you need for acquisitions to be relevant?
Yeah. And
you corrected course and said, well, look, anybody can go after a deal and try to acquire a business. But I think for people listening to this, most of them, it's, they're many millions in or many 8 figures in or beyond. And when do they get a deal? What do they look for? Why do they look for it? And you've got both the sourcing, the acquisition itself, and then sort of the integration of that process. Yeah. So that can be daunting.
So the way I look at it is, what problem do you want to solve? Because if you say, like, I can tell you generally my acquisition criteria is I want a company that's doing $1 million or more in EBITDA, in profit, currently, that has grown ideally 20% or more year over year, that has ideally a 20% profit or more, kind of a rule of 40 type thing, but which is something that applies in the software space. But I really like 20/20 or better. And then I'm looking for something that has 10 or more people, because it's going to have some sort of management structure in place that I like to be off the org chart, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to come into a company that I've got to run, and I prefer not to have to find somebody to run it. So ideally it's somebody that's coming in. And then industry wise, I generally like services, don't like anything that has inventory, because that's just another huge cost center that I don't want to have to deal with, and logistics and storage and all kinds of other stuff. I like SaaS, I like services. And then I stay away from regulated industries. So if it's FINRA, HIPAA, those kinds of things, I generally don't want to be involved in those. And that gives me a good guideline. But if I really, like, if I only lived by, well, if it's not $1 million, I'm not going to do it in profit, then I would miss out on opportunities that can really dramatically enhance the things that we've got based on the problem I want to solve. So as I look at it, there's 7 primary problems that you want to solve. One is, I want more customers. If I want more customers, that's straight up by your competitors' horizontal integration. But then a problem that you might want to solve about kind of going forward is, how do I get more leads? And so if I apply my horizontal integration acquisition criteria to acquiring lead sources, I might miss out on almost all of them. Mm-hmm. Because if I'm looking to acquire media, which is how I solve that problem, then I might be able to solve that by acquiring a list of 1 million people that I can get for, a few $100,000 that isn't making much money at all, because they don't monetize well.
Right.
So my acquisition criteria for media is different from my acquisition criteria for horizontal or competitor integration, right? And then if I'm looking for infrastructure to solve a problem for that so that I can scale better, then I need resources or people. Well, I can acquire bits of companies that have the people that I want that are not, again, performing particularly well, but they have a good solid team, or it's a team that's being underutilized right now. And so, maybe it's a $50 million company, maybe it's at the end of the road of burning through venture capital or something like that, but I can get my dev team. And if I said I would only buy the company if it was doing a certain amount of money, that would be a challenge there. Then I go to, how can I solve for AOV? If I want to increase my average order value, then I'm going to be looking at other products and services that I can cross-sell my existing list into. Again, I don't really care if it's making money or not, because I've already got my audience, right? So I only care, is it a product or service that my audience will consume? And I can't tell you how many times we've acquired something that wasn't doing well at all, that we just dropped into the thing that we've got, and it's instant crazy profitability. Then I'd go to recurring revenue, same thing. My recurring revenue, if I want to increase, the problem I'd be trying to solve would be, how can I get continuing customers, right? How can I have my customers repeat? Then again, I'm going to look for something that maybe would appeal to the people I've already got. Maybe it's something they're already buying. Maybe it's before they come to me. Maybe it's while they come to me. Maybe it's immediately after. Those things I'm going to acquire to have continuity of income. Or maybe I'm looking to increase my profitability, right? I'm solving for margin. If I'm going to do that, I'm going to do vertical integration, acquiring my supply and distribution chain, right? So I might be using outsourced customer service, a content agency, a manufacturing firm, and a sales team from somebody else. And if I acquire those 4 things, I pick up the margin that I'm giving away and all of those things in the value chain. And even if none of those were profitable for themselves, I have a business that is profitable. And so that's going to be a different set of criteria. And then last but not least, if I'm trying to solve for innovation, I'm going to pick up intellectual property so that I can provide new things to the people that I've already got. And those deals are probably smaller. But again, I'm going to pop somebody else if I license or acquire a patent, trademark, or something like that, and I pop that into something I've already got. That's a different thing too. So I think that it's important to be aware that your acquisition criteria should be somewhat malleable based on what it is you're trying to solve for. Does that make sense?
Totally. Yeah, I think that's a really, really good framework and good lens to see that through for anybody. That's actually probably anybody that's doing this routinely anyway.
It has been super helpful. And I think that like, if you look at, McKinsey did a study on what are the 10 characteristics of the most profitable companies. And one of the top ones was having a programmatic M&A, having programmatic M&A, meaning a program for M&A, right? That,
Sure.
That it is a part of your business. There's somebody that's in charge of that, and it's something that you're doing on the reg.
Yeah. And this kind of goes back to the question of where you spend your time, energy, how you allocate it, and your focus. When do you feel like, at what size in somebody's business do you feel like it makes sense to stop an activity you're doing? Like, let's look at a $5 million business that's got 10 to 20 people, and people are wearing multiple hats, including the CEO. And something has to give, right? You have to let something hit the ground if you're going to stop and focus on acquisitions. Where in the picture do you think that makes sense?
I don't think it makes sense to ever stop. I think that if you're stopping what you're doing to focus on acquisitions, then you've made a mistake and you don't have a business that is yet ready. I think you need to get the operating system in your business to be able to operate and have capacity, whether it's capacity that you acquire or hire, or partner with or contract. It's got to be somebody that knows what they're doing in that space that you bring in to help head that up, to do it in the right way. And if it's going to be something that's going to interfere with the existing business, then you probably aren't ready to acquire, because you are going to take yourself away from the core.
I think that's relevant for a lot of people. But you also mentioned in the same breath, acquire, right? Or contract, et cetera, the operations in order to do that.
Yeah.
So it sounded like within that statement, there is a world in which you've got this chaotic entrepreneur that's pumping out cash, and wants to acquire, but their bandwidth is at capacity.
Right.
And there's a way to acquire the operations team.
Yeah, you should acquire the capacity.
Got it.
So you can acquire the capacity by buying it, by hiring it,
as long as you don't stop doing, as long as you don't allow things to slow down.
I know like life is chaotic, and everything overlaps everything.
Yes.
So will you ever have the business in a perfect place where everything is running exactly right? I've never had one of those, right?
Yes.
It's
my dream.
Yeah. So but is it? That sounds boring.
Right.
Hopefully we would find some way to create additional turmoil.
That's true.
But so I think it's also being aware. It's just how chaotic is the company, and how capable are you to have someone to have the capacity to focus on the acquisition part of it, because it will absolutely distract you and adversely impact your existing business. And one of the things that I see, it's the biggest mistake that people make when they get an offer to sell, is that they get focused on the process of selling the business, and then maybe it doesn't go through, or maybe their lack of focus on the existing business causes the deal to become less attractive because they aren't focusing on the business, and the numbers go down, and then you're going to get dinged for that. So I think the key of it is just that if you already have predictable selling systems, so that you've got some core offer of a product or service that is profitable and growing, and you've got a team that can make that go, then you wouldn't really want to pour gas on that in the form of media or additional sales or products or innovation, or even up and down the distribution and supply chain. I think right then you'd think about, how can I acquire capacity? So that would then dictate, what's the first thing that I'm going to acquire? Of the 7 things that I mentioned, I'd want to acquire capacity, right? So it kind of, I think, dictates itself. So like, if you've got a problem that you don't have enough leads right now, but you've got a good product and you've got the team that can take care of that, well then how do you solve that? You can hire new salespeople. But to me, what I'd rather do is acquire media, because I know then I can solve that leads problem and see, how does the company absorb that thing that I just acquired, right? So I think it's in the context of, how is the core business running? If the core business is running pretty decent and you've got some capacity, then to me it makes sense to look. And if you don't have capacity, then the first thing you look is to acquire capacity.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I also think that it's a good, back to life being chaotic and all business being chaotic. It's relevant to look at what you have going on currently when you're asking yourself, do you have capacity to dive into acquisitions to assess your activities and say, what am I doing right now that I don't really need to be doing? Right. What's not actually fueling the engine?
Right.
And could I cut that out and spend that time on
100%
the acquisition channel?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I want to break down the real estate deal. And do we have any issues with numbers, titles?
Maybe. We'll see.
Okay. So a very, very good friends of mine, also Sam and Oliver, own Big Block Realty. And they have grown very quickly over the last several years. It's a zero fee brokerage, so 100% commission real estate brokerage in San Diego. But recently, through your guidance, they've shifted a lot of their time and energy from the growth path, the ramp that they've been on, to a much larger growth path through acquisition. Can you tell me the general structure and what the transition was there? Because I think the structure is really fascinating and something that's interesting for like really all business owners to think about.
Yeah. And it's in its most basic form, it's just a roll up. So a roll up is when you look, it's a horizontal integration play where you're looking at acquiring your competitors. And so this one though is kind of a co-opetition, in that we said, well, how do we harness the energy and momentum of several competitors in a way that will be beneficial to everybody? And so creating a roll-up structure where we can use options and contracts for a plan to aggregate a certain amount of profitability and then take it public seemed to be a good way to do that. And so what we're focused on right now is acquiring EBITDA, because the EBITDA, the profitability, is going to drive the value of the public entity. And so initially our goal was 100 million, and now we're, I think, at 83 million that we've aggregated commitments to. And so we're probably going to shoot for higher than that. I think Sam's saying 200 or 300 now.
Sam says lots of things.
Yes. But even at 100, and I think it'll probably end up at 2, but you're looking at a company that the environment that real estate brokerages sell for that are not public is fairly suppressed in relation to the public market. And that's true for all businesses, but it's especially true for real estate. So
let me put basic numbers on this.
I was going to help with that.
Okay, great. Yeah. Great. Well, and basic words, because frequently when you're talking about investments, the language of private public markets confuses even, operating entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Right. So if you own a real estate brokerage, you could sell it at some multiple.
Correct. So let me give you kind of like the most recent all industry reports say that a private, meaning not publicly traded, owner-operated company will trade at a multiple of 2.5 times its profit. The profit of a company like that is called something different than a profit of another company. It's that's traded publicly or that is professionally managed. It's called seller discretionary earnings. So that's our first lowest level. You are there. It's owner operated if you can't leave the business for a year and come back and have it be better off than it was. Okay. So that means that there's no professional management. You're not paying somebody to manage it. That's going to trade on average at 2.5 times SDE. SDE, seller discretionary earnings, is just a fancy way of saying profit that includes all of the owner benefits. So when the owner is writing off for tax purposes the trip to Cancun and the Tesla payment and the cable bill and the nanny, those are not really business expenses that have to be there.
Yeah, so it's
they're
more
doing
like
it for tax purposes,
like actual profit.
Correct.
Ish.
Yeah. So that's what that is. We're adding back, those things to EBITDA. Then we get to the next level of it's professionally managed. Professionally managed companies average across all industries, not publicly traded. They're selling at 4.5 times EBITDA. So they're actually like just getting a professional. Like if I was, and I do this quite a bit, like I play in that space quite a bit where we'll go and find an owner operated company and we'll say, let us come in, we'll buy it, or we'll take an equity piece in it and we'll help convert it to professionally managed. We're going to pick up 2x in the valuation just because we got professional managers. And the difference in how you calculate EBITDA versus SDE makes it even more profitable. So like I'll probably pick up a 3x in value. So I can buy something for $1 million that's owner operated, put in some professional managers, and it's probably worth 3.5.
And
That's a pretty fun play, right?
That's awesome. And where's the pool of professional managers?
There's a million of them out there. LinkedIn, everybody that's retired, everybody that's quiet quit, everybody that's, there's search firms. So like if you're looking to find people, now I'm going to have to put one in the middle. So I'll remember all the different tacks we're on. But if you're looking for someone, the first place is get the person who is owner operating the business to stay as an operator to help train people who are under them up the chain. If those people were going to leave, the first place I would look is who at the company is the person that's been there that knows everything and really runs everything anyway, because there's usually somebody like that. If there's not that person, then I'm going to say, is there another key employee? Like that would typically be a COO, a CMO, one of the C-suites that's not the main person who is the owner operator. Like, is that person elevatable? If they're not, is there a key employee in some section? If they're not, is there a consultant or contractor that they're using that is familiar with the business that could do that? If not, is there a contractor or consultant in the industry that might be available to do that? If not, is there a retired executive from the industry that I can find on LinkedIn that worked for some company? If not, I can go to a search firm. Before that, I'll go to my network.
Okay, so really the designation of professionally managed is just
not the owner.
Got it.
Right.
So it's just not the owner and somebody that has experience running this type of thing in the past.
Yeah.
Awesome. And so that alone increases the valuation.
Yeah.
Wild.
Yeah. So then, and because it's EBITDA instead of SDE, it's increased more than just that 2x that seems to be the increase.
Awesome.
So then we go to private equity-based companies. So the companies I've been talking about are generally under $10 million in sales and under $2 million in profit. When you get over $2 million in profit and $10 million in sales, you start to get private equity dipping in. Private equity is just an investment fund. Okay. So when you get to 10 million in sales and 2 million in EBITDA and some decent growth and professional management, but not yet publicly traded, that's where those guys play. And the average across all industries right now is 15.4 times. So you can see if you can acquire a company that's owner operated, that's a strong company, and there's lots of companies that are owner operated, they're doing $2-3 million a year, right? Now we put professional management in it. Let's say it was doing $1 million because that's easy math. So we bought it at 2.5 million, right? 2.5 times the million profit. We then put in professional management. So now we get effectively a 3x bump in that, right? Well, now the 2.5 that we've bought is worth 7.5, let's say. Let's give it to say 3. Now I'm going to go to private equity, and if it's still doing just $1 million in profit, I'm going to be at about a 15.4 valuation, right?
Crazy.
But it has to be doing more than, it doesn't have to, but pretty much has to be doing 2 million at that point. So it's worth about 30 million. So we've picked up a pretty good spread on that one company that we got into, right? Then private equity trades it to strategic partners, family offices, and public companies. And the public markets are, last time I looked, it was about a 28 times multiple of earnings on NASDAQ. So like you're going 2.5, 4.5, 15.4, 28.3, I think it was, right? So that's that hierarchy of multiples that are going around in these companies.
And so the idea with the specific real estate play is you're looking for the owner operated or professionally managed real estate companies that are, let's call it 2 million in EBITDA to 10 million in EBITDA.
Right.
And
they're going to sell for 5 times. That's what the going rate is.
Got it. Right.
Right.
So they're going to sell for 5 times. Yeah. And the concept is getting agreement from all these parties that, look, you could sell for 5 times, but if you want to be a part of this roll up,
correct,
then when we get enough EBITDA together, and let's say that everybody's got 10 million, right? So then it's finding 10 companies at 10 million to be 100 million.
Right.
Then you take the whole thing public, but that 100 million of EBITDA then is worth 28x.
It's well, in the real estate market specifically, because that was across all industries, it's worth 34.
Got it.
So that's worth 3.4 billion.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So that's a pretty good spread. That's a 34x on, well, it's not, it's almost a 7x. If you go from 5 to 35, let's say, right? That's 7 times more valuable. For putting all of that together, we are effectively taking a 30% interest in them, right? In the company. So we're retaining a 30% interest in the company that is the acquisition vehicle that's going public. So what we are effectively doing is, if you take a 35 multiple, because I can't multiply by 34, and say that we're going to take 30% of that, then we're only really taking 30% of 35, which is what, 10.5?
Mm-hmm.
So we're taking 10.5 of the 35. That means that, and let's just say that's 10, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that means that there's still a 25 multiple that they're effectively netting
mm-hmm.
instead of a 5, which means they're getting a 5x by going into this deal.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Rough numbers. That's awesome. And just tactically to close this loop. So this deal is, in, again, simple numbers. You've got 10 companies all doing 10 million.
Yep.
It's not going to be that simple. You get to 100 million, and really you're aiming at 200 or 300 now.
Yep.
But you get to 100 and then you go public.
Yep.
At what point do you have to actually combine the companies and make this thing operate as a company?
Yeah. So it is a 3 to 4 year plan. When we have completed the commitments from the first 100 million, then we'll start consolidating, and we'll need to run together for ideally 2 years, but definitely a year before we'll do that. So we're not aggregate, like the deal with the people that come in. It's also kind of fun because to participate in the opportunity, we're charging $25K. We assume there'll be about 100 companies that come in to the thing overall.
Mm-hmm.
If you say 100 times 25, that's 2.5 million. We figured the legal costs and cost of doing this will be in the 2.5 to 3 million range. So it should be self-liquidating. And as soon as we get the first 100, they'll all be required to move over to our accounting system. So we have an accounting and management system that will give us insight into everything, that everybody will be on the same system. So then the only change that's going to really happen a year or so before we do the public part is that we'll be filing consolidated financials and all of that kind of stuff. So it's a kind of a multi-step program. Step 1, get the commitments. Step 2, finalize the commitments, get the accounting and the back office management on the same platform, get consolidated financials done. Then step 3, about a year or so before we decide to go public, we are full integration, and then they all become part of that same company. So
does that include branding overhaul?
It does, yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, it has to be the same company.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The cool thing is, though, if you think about it, there are exciting, because if you said there's a 3 or 4 year plan and we're going to do this and then we're just going to sit and not do anything while we wait for it to percolate along, a lot of things could happen in losing enthusiasm and interest.
Mm-hmm.
But because we kind of have an event every single 12 months in moving towards the plan, everybody, I think, can stay motivated and enthused about being part of it.
Yeah. And then once it goes public, where do you go from there?
So then when it goes public, we have trickle out requirements. So there's holding requirements and things like that. But also, our goal is to make it exciting enough for people to want to stay in so that it is a good investment for them. And then we have lots of vehicles to allow them to get money out if they want, that you can use in a public company. So those will be some of the things that we'll be sharing with them as we get a little bit further down the path.
Love it. Well, that's a good cliffhanger, because those things are interesting mechanisms.
Mm-hmm.
And if people want to find out those things, I'm sure they could find you on the socials and whatnot.
Yeah. I mean, the easiest thing is, in a public company, if you've got shares, then you could sell them through a private offering of public equity. That would be something that private investment, that's what it stands for. Private investments in public equity. You could do any kind of sale that wasn't going to affect the stock price, because that's the key, is you can't have a whole bunch of people dumping their stock and taking profit, because then the stock goes to zero, and why did you do it?
Right.
And you won't get market makers that will support it. But and then also you can do equity collars. So you can basically say, go to a lending institution like the stock brokerage, and if you've got restricted stock, then they'll loan on the stock. They'll loan some amount of it. So if you had $10 million in stock and wanted to get a loan for $2.5 or $3 million, that would not be a terribly difficult thing to do. Yeah.
Yeah. The idea of borrowing against any asset like that is such a good tool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It really is.
I love it. Well, I appreciate you carving out time today, man.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Always good to see you. I think that both entry level tactical stuff got covered. And I love hearing the specifics of deals. The nuances of specific deals for me are where the granular elements, it's like where the rubber meets the road.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Yeah, where I can pick it apart and think, okay, practical application.
Yeah.
Where can people find out more about Roland Frasier?
I too have a podcast called Business Lunch, which
Love it.
You have been on, I believe. And,
Indeed.
we'll have to be on there again. And I'm everywhere on social / Roland Frasier. Those are probably the best 2 places to find me.
Dig it.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, always great, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Love it. I hope you enjoyed the episode as much as I enjoyed doing it. I need your help. There are 3 places you can find Beyond a Million. The podcast itself, beyondamillion.com, which has some cool free resources, including a free course. And we finally launched the Beyond a Million YouTube channel. I would love it if you would go there and subscribe. And if you don't want to, you still would probably enjoy seeing the visual content. Check it out, youtube.com /@Beyond a Million.